The freelancer lifestyle. Okay, so in this video, we want to give you an introduction to what it's like to be a freelancer. What is the lifestyle considerations that you might have? And how does that differ from, let's say, getting a real full-time job? So why don't we explore that? We'll explain all the different considerations you might have. Okay, so in the middle here, we're going to first talk about what are the common lifestyle traits of a freelancer. So the first thing is flexible working hours. So you're always going to be at the mercy as to who's hiring you and what hours they want you to work. And when a freelancer, it's not always so clear cut. It's not that 9 to 5 that's most common in the full-time arena. So sometimes you might be required to work at night. You might have to do weekend work. You might even be hired by someone from a different time zone, and thus you might have to work on non-working hours. So the common lifestyle trait here is, as a freelancer, you got to be prepared not always to do the 9 to 5 work, but to do alternate working styles as well. Second is, commonly you're going to get higher hourly rates than other employees. Remember in our last video, we talked about how you're not always going to get benefits like healthcare, insurance, all the retirement benefits that you might get. So you're going to get a lot of higher hourly rates in addition because you're negotiating what those rates are. So you're not going to work for something that's substandard. So you get a lot of those rates because they're shorter term projects and thus you have a little bit more leverage. The third is that you're good with remote technology to optimize the work. So one of the common things is that you're always going to be familiar with the latest and greatest application, the latest and greatest software, and all the different tools that you might use to work from a remote site or to work online. That's going to be a really common trait and something that you'd have to consider as part of your lifestyle. Working on a computer, working with these apps, working with new technology. It's always going to be very common. Now in the periphery of this little circle in the middle, we have 4 different other ways that people might work. So why don't we start with the upper left? So the first is work at home. There's a lot of freelancers who opt to work from a home office, and they might do that because they want to, or they might do that just because of the necessity of the job. So that enables a lot of people to, from a lifestyle standpoint, work while simultaneously caring for family or caring for your home while you're working. The second is you might save on some of the office costs, and you could actually write off a portion of your rent and mortgage as business expenses for your taxes. So really, really cool way to kind of think about, gosh, your work is more than just work. It's more than just going into an office. You're actually working from your home and all the different considerations that that entails. The second consideration is you might actually work on site for the client. So just because you're a freelancer doesn't negate you from actually being able to work with the people on site. So that means that whoever might hire you, it's not always going to be a local situation. You might need to travel directly to your client and work wherever in the world that they're located. Now, they might pay for that. They might give you travel expenses in order to make that a possibility. But you got to think about that you're not always going to be working in kind of your local market. The freelance market is much more broad. It's much more even international in nature. And then, of course, the second, as we mentioned earlier, is that employers will often pay your living expenses where you're required to travel. So if you are required to fly in, fly out each week, they might pay the cost of that for a hotel for your airline expenses. If you need to move somewhere, let's say for a 3 or a 6 month period, they might pay the relocation cost to move your family, to move your furniture, just to relocate in a new area. But really interesting way to consider, gosh, if I got a freelance gig, I might not be working in the market that I'm most accustomed to. I might have to travel wherever that client is located. A third consideration, and this is something that a lot of people seek out these days, is to be a digital nomad. So many freelancers, they're location independent. And as long as they have a computer and they have internet, they're capable of actually communicating with the client and doing their work. So it's a really cool way to think about your lifestyle is, gosh, I can move wherever in the world I want to. I could work on the beach. I could work while I'm hiking in the mountains. I could work from wherever in the world I want to go. I could travel frequently. It's really, really fun and a really different sort of lifestyle. You don't have to live in one location, in a house, in one market. You could travel the world and work online. Really, really cool way to do some freelancing. And then fourth is shared offices. So with freelancing really becoming a popular thing where people are working off-site, working online, working digitally, shared offices are becoming a big industry. And the reason is that many prefer the comfort of a real office as opposed to working at, let's say, their own home. So people can cohabitate with others, and maybe they pay per use, or maybe they do a monthly fee, but there's the opportunity to really kind of have that office camaraderie and really work in a professional environment, but not to do so on a full-time basis. Other people, they might use their office in non-conventional ways. So they might do work at a coffee shop, they might go to the library, or just use other public locations as kind of their de facto office for the day. And gosh, they might change that every single day, go work from a new place. But at the end of the day, lifestyle considerations are a big part of deciding to become a freelancer because you never know which of these four things you're ultimately going to do. One day you might work at home, the next week you might be called on site, then you might say, gosh, I want to travel the world while I'm working. And while you're traveling the world, you might say, gosh, I want to actually work in an office of some sort. I want to have that camaraderie and talk to other people. So you might go work at the coffee shop, or you might go work in a temporary office. But really interesting to think about all these different considerations while also having some of the more common lifestyle traits as well. Now, those are lifestyle considerations. What are the professional considerations that you need to have as a freelancer? So the first is you need to self-motivate, and you need to actually find the time to work. When you're not going into an office, when you don't have a specific full-time boss, long-term boss, when you don't have that 9 to 5 schedule, you actually need to say, gosh, now is my time to work. I can't be distracted by social media, by TV, by other people, by all the fun things going on in the world. I need to decide when my working schedule is, find that time, and self-motivate myself so that I can do a great job. Definitely a professional consideration, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with when they get into freelancing. Another thing that a lot of people need to consider is that sales and marketing becomes a top priority. When you're a freelancer, it's not a matter of looking for a job one time and then you all of a sudden have that for all of eternity. You're constantly doing sales and marketing. You might do a gig that lasts a couple of weeks, and when that gig is over, suddenly you need to find something new. So in order to optimize that, you're going to need to allocate a specific amount of time to finding that next gig. Or maybe you can do a couple gigs at once, so you're always kind of looking for that next thing. You really, really need to give good consideration to how you're marketing yourself, marketing your qualifications and capabilities, and then ultimately when you're doing the sales, how you close that to really make sure that it's a full-time gig for you. Third is all the resources. So remember, you're not necessarily working on site, which means that you are accountable for all the different work equipment you need. So things like office supplies, the different software you need, a computer, anything that you need for the job suddenly become your responsibility to do. So you're going to have to think about, gosh, what are the different things that I'm going to need to go purchase in order to make this my own home business or remote business, whatever it may be. Fourth, you got to remember that income is variable. So if you get a big payday one month, you really, really do well, you have to actually think about, gosh, this needs to last long term. Some of that income actually needs to go back into the business, and so that I can buy some of these resources, this equipment. I can save some times for when sales aren't so good. I can use some of that time to travel to the office site. I can use some of that time to really travel the world and really maximize my lifestyle considerations. You need to remember that income is variable. So sometimes you're going to do great, sometimes you're not going to do great, sometimes you're going to be right in between. But a real important professional consideration for freelancers is knowing in advance that the income, it's not going to be as fixed as a full-time gig. The next is that contracts are absolutely key. Contracts designate what the scope of your work is, how much you're going to be paid, how you're going to be paid, and all the different responsibility and scope that your job entails. So you need to really invest a lot of time into the legal aspects of writing a good contract, enforcing it where necessary, and using that contract to really customize what the job is going to be, both for yourself in terms of protecting yourself and maximizing your own benefit from it, as well as for the employer. So you're going to need to do contract writing, you're going to need to know legal terminology, you're going to need to negotiate a lot of the different terms, you're going to need to be really familiar with contract law. So something to really consider. Finally, if you're a freelancer, this is a business, which means you need to do business taxes. You need to keep track of your financials. You need to do customer service for all the different gigs that you're doing. You need to invoice your clients and then ultimately collect from them. It's a business. And if you're not doing these activities, then gosh, you're not maximizing the potential that your freelance business might have. So anyway, freelancing, it's very, very different, and it really requires a lot of these considerations, both lifestyle as well as professional. But now that you've taken this course, now that you've listened to this video, hopefully that gives you a little bit of thinking in terms of, gosh, is this right for me? And if it is right for me, what are the different things that I need to consider before launching a freelance career? Anyway, hope that's very helpful. Let's move on to the next topic.